So today I want to talk about some questions that came to me in an email from someone who is a participant at KBV. And it's around practice, and in particular practice in lay life, and in the very particulars, to a large degree, a feeling of falling short. Like, am I really doing enough in my practice? And I'm going to share the questions with you just so you can see. And this is not the questions quite the way they came in, but I condensed them a little bit. So this idea is, am I doing enough in my practice? And then these kind of three areas: how can I work with the feeling of falling short or even heading backwards? The self-judgment that comes up. Am I a good Buddhist? And then there was some thoughts around, like, what does that mean really? And is it even good to think like that? And what is the Vinaya for a lay person? How do I really know I'm doing the right things? I think is there. What would they be? And then who or what to follow, like teachers, traditions. There was the reflection from this person about how definitions seem to be different depending on who you're listening to, and practices vary. And what is it, if I'm dipping into different traditions, how does that affect my practice? And I would say, how does it affect our development? That's really where I think the important reflection needs to be. So I think this is a problem. This doesn't just happen when you're living lay life. This also happens to monastics. Sometimes people even leave the robes because they feel like, I'm living. Oh, I forgot to introduce you. I'm sorry, Nish. No. He's like, never mind. She's here, guys. Come in person and you'll be invisible. It's like some people really like that. I'm sorry. Anyway, the point being, sometimes people leave the robes even because they feel like, I'm living this monastic life, but I don't feel like I'm making or progress. I'm not doing a good enough job, and somehow I shouldn't be in this anymore, or something like that. And then I always feel like that's a sad kind of state of affairs, because this self-judgment that so many of us are conditioned to have, that really is so debilitating. It's something that we want to be really careful about. I think the first question when we find ourselves criticizing ourselves harshly is this just a habit that's been developed, a way that I've been conditioned, in which no matter what I do, it's never enough? Because what would be enough? And so if we can see if that's the case, then we need to work with that mental pattern and recognize that it doesn't even matter that it's focused on the practice, or that it's focused on self, because that's where those patterns are focused. That's where they get sticky, that we're somehow we've developed this to somehow protect ourselves, or in some other way psychologically to survive. And we want to really work with that as a dysfunctional pattern. But let's say that that's not really what's happening, that it's more like a feeling of uncertainty or doubt around, what it means to be making progress. And especially when we find ourselves in situations in life, it's true in lay life, it's also true in monastic life, that we can find ourselves in situations where it feels like we are maybe even going backwards because we're maybe a bit overwhelmed, or maybe some actions by body or speech or mind that are not as enlightened and awake as we would like them to be, and or we're struggling with something, and then it can feel like, well, maybe we just aren't really doing enough, or we're not practicing properly, we're not making the progress we should be making. But then if we can have in mind that it's normal to come to these junctures, to have these experiences, to find ourselves sometimes flailing, sometimes confounded, or whatever, overwhelmed by feeling. There's all kinds of different scenarios. The key is, can we come back to the Dhamma, come back to solid ground? And how do we do it? Sometimes we need to reach out to a friend or a teacher. Sometimes we need to really take some time to settle and reflect on the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha. And when we can do that, we also want to be able to bring in those Brahma Viharas and have the kindness, the compassion for ourselves, the understanding that everything we encounter in our experience is offering us the opportunity to come back to mindfulness, come back to awareness, come back to the knowing, and to be able to see the situation not from this point of view of me, myself, me, mine, but to come back to it from this position of, this is the Dhamma, and this is how I can rest in it. This is how I can observe what's happening and be present with it, the whole mess, giving my kind attention to it, taking care of my heart, knowing that this too is an opportunity to strengthen my mind, to strengthen my virtue, to strengthen my wisdom, and to pull away from that self-critical, negative, sometimes harsh voice in our heads. That is probably not going to be so helpful in our development. Evaluation, yeah. Awareness and clarity, clear comprehension about what's happening, yeah. But harsh criticism, we can observe it as something to take care of, to work through. And when we think about, how do I know if I'm on the right track, it really comes down to the fundamentals of the Buddhist teachings. The Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, the precepts, whether it's 5, it's 8, it's 311. It's like knowing what the Buddha laid down as a description of the Dhamma, the way things are. It's not about being Buddhist. It's not about being a good Buddhist. It's about attuning ourselves to those fundamentals that are true, no matter where we're at, no matter who we think we are, no matter what the culture is, no matter what the time is, and all of not just human history, it's all of the beings in all realms. It's all the same Dhamma, the way things actually are. And we get caught up or sort of stuck sometimes in doubt or misunderstanding, not knowing yet, not yet seeing clearly the whole picture of Dhamma. It's understandable. And then we want to rely, of course, on the Buddha's teaching, on the teachings from people who have been studying and practicing Dhamma, people who are exhibiting Dhamma in their way of living. And that can be your Kalyanamitta, the one that you know who's got really good moral virtue, better than your own, and you emulate them, or wisdom, or generosity, or faith, confidence, or learning. You know, people have, we all have different qualities. We've got strengths and weaknesses. And if we connect with those who have strength in an area where we want to develop our strength, that can be really helpful. So we don't have to think, am I a good Buddhist or not? You know, it's more like, how can I shift? It's about being on this trajectory of moving closer and closer into alignment with Dhamma. And even if it doesn't feel like that's a steady progress, because it doesn't appear that way, and yet the more we put our attention there, the more we put our intention there, the more we're going to be moving in that direction. And even if it feels like there's some setback, there's still the development underneath. And then we get surprised sometimes. We have something happen where we ordinarily would react in a way that now we recognize as unskillful. When we don't react that way, we have this wisdom coming to the foreground. And our actions follow it. So basically, what I would say is coming back to the basics. And wherever that doesn't feel clear, finding a way to clarify it. And that last part of who and what do I follow, it's those basic principles. And in terms of different traditions and different teachers, this is something that I want to emphasize anyway, with the way that we've got so many different teachings and teachers available to us online. And you know, now we'll go on pilgrimage and people will meet different Kruba Ajahns in Thailand, and they don't all use the same definitions. They might say, you know, have different ways of expressing the experience of deepening in the Dhamma. And then we might have the feeling like we have to somehow sort it out and figure out who's right, who's wrong. But that's not really the helpful approach. The helpful approach is realizing we don't have to evaluate whether or not their use of the words are the same or different, but to just try to really understand what the experience they're describing, and see if, you know, we can incline in that direction. That's more awake than we are right now, more developed. So even though teachers will have different ways of talking about the awakening experience or samadhi and how it is to meditate or these various things, or even if you're, you know, looking at different traditions, all the Buddhist traditions have the fundamental early Buddhist teachings as their basis, and then every tradition has things added in. And even what I'm saying today is something added in a way. You know, some other way of expressing it, of looking at it, of thinking about things, and we find the things that help us understand the Dhamma more and more clearly and directly. So important. Like what somebody said earlier about suddenly this knowledge, this understanding emerged that I'm not the body. So this comes because of that study, that reflection, that continued meditation practice, and allowing the mind to become as still as it can become. And then, at some point, insights arise. And whether we're interested or drawn to whichever tradition we're drawn to, that might karmically be the way that is open to us, that's fine. But at the end of the day, we need to come back to the fundamentals. And someone also asked about, if, for instance, coming into the upcoming Upasika program, and doing some other study and in this kind of early Buddhist texts kind of teachings, and then also doing something else in a different tradition, and would that be a good idea? And my answer was maybe not right now, because sometimes trying to pull from different sources with different definitions can be confusing, especially as we're trying to go deeper. But that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with those other teachings, or that it's not a good idea at some point. So how do we choose? How do we know where to put our focus? It's really looking at whether or not this is bringing more peace, more clarity, more understanding, or not. So when the Buddha said to Mahapajapati, you know which things bring more peace and which things lead away from it. So of course, the ones that bring more peace, that's what you follow. And that can be different for different people. It can be different at different times in the practice. We have to be willing to make changes, but also willing to set aside things and simplify. It's an art. It's not something we can just follow a prescription on. Is really observing our own mind and seeing where the conditioning is that's inhibiting our progress, inhibiting our happiness, the true happiness, not the ego gratifying happiness. And where are we inspired and supported in the right direction? So I was going to show you that sutta again from last night, because it's such a simple, clear sequence that actually gives this same kind of guidance for how to make progress. And then, of course, this idea of feeling like we're falling short, because life's complicated, right? We're not practicing constantly. Oh, maybe we are. No matter what's happening, that's the best. But it can look like, well, now I'm in this, overwhelming situation where people are arguing, or maybe I'm feeling really strong feelings about something, and then can we just step back enough to practice with that, whatever it is. As long as we're making that effort, taking that in, we're never falling short. Or if there's something that we feel like we should be doing, could be doing, that would be beneficial to be doing and we're not, we can ask ourselves, why not? And then put that into the practice. For example, sometimes, people, they're often the case, people will have a daily meditation practice for a while and then it erodes and they're not doing it. And then, they feel like they're falling short in that regard. Well, then make a determination and carve out the time and just do it. So that it's not like, oh, I'm not really doing what I should be doing. Well, why aren't we doing what we should be doing? Do what you should be doing. But then also be conscientious around that, knowing that we have to have things in a balance. Don't make the requirements impossible to live up to. Make them possible. The Buddha was constantly making things possible for people. He'd set a rule. There would be circumstances where that rule was a problem for people, and he would modify it to keep the spirit of it, the initial important guideline, with modifications to help people. I hope that makes sense. So the sutta is in the Sutta Nipata. It's in the second chapter, number 11, with Rahula. And I'm not showing the initial intro part, but this is the description of this path from beginning to end. The words are for monastic, but you can also see how they apply in lay life. One who's given up the 5 sensual stimulations, so pleasing and delightful. For monastics or lay people, it's giving up the attachment, the craving, the thinking of this sensual stimulation as a way to find happiness. That's what you're really giving up. Noticing when you like something, when you don't like something, and noticing that it's not going to bring you happiness either way, getting it or getting away from it. So that's what you're really working with. Who's left the home life out of faith. So if you're monastically inclined, then you're, going into monastic life, but in a lay life, you're bringing that faith into your life, into every aspect of your life. In order for one goal, making an end of suffering, no matter if you're, whatever form you're in, having new spiritual friends, spending time, staying in remote lodgings, having a place where you can be quiet and secluded mentally, hopefully also somewhat physically, where things can be quiet and not overly interested in food, just being moderate in eating, moderate in sleeping, doing those things that are supportive of your body and mind without indulging overly and basically making ourselves miserable in a different way. All of the requisites for our life, the things we need, food, clothing, shelter, medicine, water, all of those things, use them in a responsible, moderate way, not craving, not getting too caught up in it, because we don't want to come back to this world again and again, repeating the same cycles, having these same highs and lows and desires and passion and disappointments, but instead the peace and joy and kindness and generosity and openness and unconditional love that comes with the development of the heart seeing the truth of the way things are. Being restrained in our monastic code. So what's the Vinaya for a layperson? So the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the Five Precepts. The Sagalika Sutta is a beautiful, in the Digha Nikaya number 31, maybe? Something like that, 32, I don't know, it's in the long discourses. You know, the Buddha lays out this beautiful way of being in relationships, that we are then fulfilling the role that we have ultimately without the attachment that brings us suffering. We have mindfulness immersed in the body, and to be full of disillusionment, not caught up in some kind of glorification of something that's actually deteriorating, turning away from the draw of the attractive, the sign of the attractive, that provokes lust, with the mind unified and serene, meditating on the body as it is, the unbeautiful, meditating with stillness, signlessness, giving up this idea of self, tendency to conceit. When we break through that one, there's complete peace. So just like these are kind of, and this is one of the 1,000 ways that the Buddha described this path. And this is the opportunity we all have. You know, noticing when we get too harsh with ourselves, maybe sometimes harsh with others, and coming back to compassion for the situation we find ourselves in this world, where it's so out of our control, so unreliable, everything. Knowing that there is this stable ground that we rest upon, that we come back to, the Dhamma. And when we feel confused, then it's good to reach out to someone who's developed on the path, where we can find those simple words again, those simple expressions that help us to see clearly. So I want to offer that for your reflection, and I'd like to hear any comments, questions you have.
I like that for like layperson's Vinaya kind of idea too. I like the 10 wholesome actions a lot. That's a good
that's
list
important
to use. Yeah, if you feel like precepts aren't enough, this is like precepts plus.
Yeah,
list.
because the 10 wholesome actions include the different aspects of right speech, and then the opposites of the 3 poisons, you know, basically letting go of greed, hatred, and delusion. Yeah.
I think they stick on for the 4th precept, like no lying, gossip, harsh and divisive, I think is the usual list. And then it's like covetousness, ill will,
letting go of longing.
Yeah, letting go of covetousness for longing, letting go of ill will, and right view.
Having right view.
Right view, yeah, it's good. It's a good list.
Is there a specific sutta for these 10 wholesome actions?
all
There
over
are
the place.
hundreds
It's all
of
over the place,
suttas
you know.
with
It's
the 10.
probably, is it in the Sagala
If you,
Sutta also?
no, I think the best thing is to go to the Book of Tens and the middle in the numerical discourses, and you'll see these 10 wholesome and 10 unwholesome actions in there. And it starts with, the 10 wholesome, avoiding killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, harsh speech, divisive speech, frivolous speech, and
Divisive.
goodwill
Adrian's also put something up
on it.
from the
Great.
Majjhima Nikaya. Yeah.
I love that.
Also in Bhikkhu Bodhi's book on the Eightfold Path, he goes into them in detail as a way to look at them under right view.
Yeah, they're really all over the place.
Yeah, it's good.
But there's this whole series of them in the Book of Tens too. Of those ones. Yep, there they are.
Oh, okay.
How far did
There's a
that go?
Majjhima Nikaya one, Adrian found.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we got it all. Good.
How long?
So recently I feel a lot of conflict when it comes to my practice. Um I think the way the Buddha would describe it is as being intoxicated with youth. Like I'm still pretty young and I feel like, oh, while I'm doing all these practice, I feel like I'm missing out on so much. And of course, I reflect on the thing that my friend are going after and how they're how it doesn't last. Or so one of the things that since I s- started working, every vacation I have, um, I use it for a retreat or like going to a temple. So whenever I hear somebody say that, oh, they went to Japan and they have so much fun there, and I'm like, oh, I want to go to Japan too. And so that's conflict. But yeah, so when I feel like, oh, I'm committed to this very long-term vision. Um, yeah. Well, you have any advice, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, there are different ways to work with it. But if we want to watch that if we force ourselves too much onto a narrow track, we might just bolt at some point. Whereas maybe once in a while you do one of those things with your friends and then you evaluate, how does it feel? Try not to do anything that's going to be producing long-term damage, but something relatively safe. But just, like sometimes it's not enough to tell ourselves that it's really not going to be that beneficial in the future or really bring good, happiness. Sometimes we have to experience it a little bit. And we have to use our judgment about that, and sometimes the mind needs a break from the relentless practice, but do it in a way that's wise and see how it feels. It's not like there's anything wrong with going to Japan, especially as a layperson. Is sometimes somebody will say, "Yeah, I feel guilty to watch a movie." I'm like, "You're a layperson. Why not watch a movie? Just what kind of movie are you watching? Are the people in that movie keeping the precepts? And if they're not keeping the precepts, is that glorified, or is that showing the real suffering that comes from that? Just be aware of what is going on And we're constantly given the material to learn about our own mind. And we have to learn what works with this mind. What does it need in order to be uplifted and bright and happy and a certain level of spiritual enthusiasm and 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 open and loving and kind, because it's not how we feel all the time. When there's aversion or anger or jealousy or whatever, can we be with that? Be with it, understand it, find our way through it, realize how it feels. Yeah. Yeah, Mahesh.
So this is slightly unrelated, but in they say like once you become a monk, in after 5 years you're not dependent. You can be on your own. So in lay life, generally when we practice, it can take a lot of years to achieve anything or like awakening or right. But with monks, what happens in 5 years that they can be independent? Does it, is it like
Okay.
it's guaranteed something happens in 5 years? Or,
So the question, because you might not have been able to hear me, said, so in monks, when you enter monastic life, then after 5 years, you're able to be dependent and go independent and go places on your own. And in lay life, who knows how long it might take to make some kind of breakthrough or progress. And then, the question is for the monastics, is there something that happens with 5 years? Like, is there something guaranteed that then you can go on your own? Now it's more about the training. You just, by that time, usually you have enough training that you know how to behave. You don't have to have people around you all the time in order to keep the rules and that kind of thing. But it's not a guarantee that you've like made some kind of breakthrough in wisdom. You've just been around enough of it. You've had enough direct training probably by that time that you could, be traveling or living somewhere else.
It's like you went to college for 4 years and had 1 year of work experience.
but the reason why people come to monastic life is for awakening or right. So isn't it better to stay in the same place if 5 years nothing happens? Then
A lot of times people do stay in the same place. I mean, I know like Ajahn Tejapanyo has been with Ajahn Dunn for, man, I think I started visiting there like 20 years ago or more. And he's still there. You don't have to go somewhere else. You might stay with this
like,
master teacher,
yeah,
for the
but
whole
what
time.
happens there that they can now you can be independent? What like something
It's-
must
It's
happen,
just,
right?
it's just the, like I said, it's kind of like graduating from the fundamental training. It's not the monastic training doesn't guarantee awakening. I mean, that's why we're doing it, but you should also be doing that in lay life, like be determined to awaken, enter the stream, be determined to develop the mind as far as you possibly can before your last breath in this world. This is your chance. And of course, I'm never going to say that it's better to be in lay life than monastic life, because monastic life is set up for this. It's like got all these supports and all these restrictions that you don't have in lay life. But the ability to do it in lay life is still there. And it really depends on kind of what our karma is, what our situation is. If we have commitments in the world, then we have to kind of stick it out and work through that. But it's like whatever situation we're in, everybody listening to this has already picked up the Dhamma. And some of those monastics enter the stream before they ever get into robes. And that's why they get into robes. So it's like, just practice with everything. And no, there's no guarantee for monastics. But yeah, to be able, I mean, you're not living with, when you're in lay life, you're not living with a teacher. So you have to put your own program in place.
I actually really like that after 5 years you have the options, because sometimes where you get trained is not really the best place for you to be making progress. You just never know. And so after you've gotten the basics down, you have the opportunity to go like try out different places and see what might be better. And then sometimes people just come right back later, like, oh, it's just me. I just
Yeah, I'm
still have a
taking
lot of
this wherever
defilements to
I
work
go.
on. Yeah, I'm taking this wherever I go. I just gotta. So it's kind of good to see it for yourself too. You know, like go other places and be like, oh, okay, all of this complaints, the complaints in my head, it's just me.
Yeah, and people find that out when they become monastics too, that the problems they had in their life haven't gone away. Somebody just like the partner I just left is here in the monastery. It's another monk, but it's still here. You know what I'm saying? Driving me crazy. Oh, wait a minute, maybe the crazy is in here. Paula?
Yeah, I was interested in the beginning part where you're talking about self-criticism. And I recently did a deep dive because my son actually sent this information on the inner critic. And there's 3 talks on it by a lay teacher named Rob Burbea. If it's okay with you, I could put the links into the chat. So if people are feeling like that's an area where they are needing to do some work, and I think we all have the inner critic. It just depends on how developed it is. I think is really useful to do and explore there. But I wanted to say that I feel like when I explored it, even though I knew that I had that within myself, I also feel like I have the outer critic. And I think that can be partially due to conditioning. I think my sister and brother and I were all, my parents were, so I was just sort of in our nature, in our society, and wondering what I'm guessing that the way to deal with that is just to use metta. What are your thoughts?
So you mean the outer critic, meaning criticizing others?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We definitely criticize others, and it's definitely connected to criticizing ourselves. And the aversion that comes with it, and the sometimes, we have to watch our mind and see what's really going on, but sometimes we criticize others in order to kind of puff ourselves up. The Buddha talked about this a lot.
I don't think that's it. I think it's more just a habit.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
also things have to be done my way.
Right. My way is the right way. Yeah, so this is just so, like you said, it's so pervasive. It's so common to human nature, human experience, and it was happening with the monastics at the time of the Buddha too. The Buddha would tell them, no matter what you develop, don't, like me criticizing others for not being as whatever as we are, whatever, that kind of thing, or any of that kind of comparison. And so, okay, this is a mental habit, like you say. It's a conditioned pattern. And that's what we have to recognize about all this stuff, our perceptions, our thoughts that arise in the mind. That's all from the past. It's all from conditioning. The ones we put energy into and really think about, and we're perpetuating that for coming into the mind later. And it's it's like when we see these patterns in ourselves, then we want to investigate them and understand. I like, you know, what you're saying, take a deep dive into it and see what it's really about. And not to blame ourselves because we have this conditioning. It's just how it is. The mind is going to be conditioned in some way. And then we look at the relative wholesome or unwholesome nature of it, and we start to make changes. First of all, seeing it the way it is, you know, like, why do we think we're better? Why do we think we know better? Why do we put when we're criticizing someone else, we're putting ourselves above them? What the hell? Who do we think we are anyway?
So painful.
It's like, what? It's painful for us.
That's
And
right.
then it's
That's what I mean.
painful when you let that out, you know, it's like, oh my
It's painful for
God.
other people, but when you realize that it's extremely painful for yourself as well. So it's just
Yeah.
gotta stop.
Yeah. When you start to see the dukkha, then, you know, hopefully the natural response is to like let go. It's like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to think like this. But we have to build the alternative, the loving kindness, the compassion, the patience,
Mhm.
the acceptance. We're all nuts. Get over it. And, you know, so this is what we've got. This is what we've got to work with. And it's great. The Buddha was brilliant. You know, it's suffering. Look at the suffering. This is our sign of which way to go for happiness. This is what's telling us what's in the way. It's all this suffering that we're creating that keeps coming over and over again because of that past conditioning. We don't have to think like this. We don't have to act like that. I guess nobody's raising their hand because it's 10:30 here. Mayura, you want to say a few words? Just she's going to talk a little bit about the Upasika program and invite you. You'd be well too, Christine.
Okay, so just a repeat for those who were there last night, but not everybody was, that you should have by now gotten an email introducing the Upasika program with a link to the webpage and the application. And just want to, bye Cynthia, just want to I guess link it to the sutta today because it's really a response to the question of how can we practice in lay life and how can we really draw near and take on the training to the next level. So I just want to encourage everybody to read the description, check it out on the website. There's an application and an application deadline. So if you're into it, you could begin to think about if it really will fit for you for this year. And if it's not, that's okay. It'll be again next year. But I think that's enough to say about it, unless you two want to.
Yeah, thank you, Mayura. Yeah, that's it. How to practice for the next level. And yeah, if you haven't gotten an email, you're probably not on the mailing list because we sent it out to everybody. It always gives people a chance to unsubscribe. They weren't intending to be there. Yeah.
Paula, did you have a question about it?
No, I wanted to mention something about the Saturday morning while the Ayyas are gone. If you're done.
I'm done. That's it, but yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, while I'm planning on doing the Saturday mornings, there's always a little Zoom uncertainty. So if you're on the WhatsApp or if you're not signed up, I think that's through the website. And if there's any problems with you being able to hear me or with me not being able to go on, I'll put something in the WhatsApp. And the format's just going to be check-in like usual, meditation, short monastic video, and then reflections. So I hope everyone will join us and we can keep our Dhamma momentum going.
Yeah, thank you, Paula. Thank you, Mayura, too. Well, friends, I always love spending this time with you, and we're gonna miss you a little while. Well, will we? I don't know. We'll be busy. I'm sorry. Try to be honest, you know.
I still love you, but we
No,
won't be thinking
we-
about you probably. Sorry.
No, I think some of you will come to mind, and for sure. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you when we get back. And I'm going to be away an extra week, but I think Paula's taking care of that Saturday too, right? Paula, you've got 3 weeks. Yeah, and then we'll be back.
Have a great trip, y'all.
Thank you.
It's really wonderful for everybody.